these Facebook Lives that we're doing with our board members. We wanted to let you get to know who these folks are, what their passions are, why they're here at AAS, and what they're doing with suicide prevention. So I can say that I'm very lucky to have Jacque Christmas here with me to sort of kick us off. Jacque is our new secretary of our board. And of course, with that comes a whole slew of excellent and awesome responsibilities that Jacque will get to experience on our board. So Jacque, thanks so much for joining me this afternoon to talk with everybody.
Yes, thank you for having me. Thank you for scheduling these events.
Yeah, absolutely. So Jacque, let's just kick it off and let us get to know a little bit more about you. Can you tell us about yourself and then sort of how you got into suicide prevention and AAS?
Sure. And I'll just start with some of the basics. I'm 62 years old. I'm married. I've been married for 29 years. We have between us 5 children. We had yours, mine, and ours. Of our 5 children, 3 are surviving. I live in Southwest Missouri, around the Joplin area. And how I got involved in suicide prevention is, it's been a journey, as most things in life, right? And so I have worked for the Department of Mental Health for 26 years. Prior to that, I had 10 years of service at a local med-surg hospital and a community behavioral health care center. But so I can say, I think that I'm quite resilient because I have lasted in state government for 26 years. And so I've had many opportunities. In 2008, I became the fatality review coordinator for the department. And what had happened was that we had a couple of really what we refer to as high profile deaths. And we received attention from the governor's office and from the Mental Health Commission. And eventually there were new state statutes that came from investigating what had happened during that time, what had happened with those 2 high profile deaths. And so there was a statute that passed in 2007 to establish an external fatality review panel to look at what we refer to as under suspicious circumstances. Mm-hmm. That includes all unexpected deaths. So suicides, accidents, including opioid overdoses, deaths where maybe a restraint was used within 72 hours, deaths related to burns, and then other things like choking and aspiration, bowel obstruction, seizure disorders. What our focus is on preventable, what some people might call preventable or predictable or foreseeable deaths. And so when I took that position, I was charged with developing and implementing a process for this review. And so I needed to learn as much as I could about preventable deaths. So the first suicide prevention conference I attended was in 2008, and that was in Missouri. And it was very moving. I can't remember the keynote's name, but Chris, you may know, mm-hmm. It was a couple, an Army couple, a man and his wife, and they had lost 2 children. One, I think it was war activity. The other was suicide. And anyway, it just opened my eyes. And so the other thing then that happened was I had the opportunity to attend the first Zero Suicide Academy. That was, yes, Anne-Marie just said it, Graham. It was the Grahams, yes. So I attended the first Zero Suicide Academy in Washington, D.C. in 2014. I attended with a team from the chief medical director's office, and that's the fatality review process is under the chief medical director. And so that was, I mean, that was like just an epiphany, right? I met the movers and shakers. I've got my notes here. I know I'm going to forget somebody, but I met David Covington at that academy. I met Dr. Jobs. I met Ursula Whiteside, who later then became the Missouri mentor for Zero Suicide. I met Dr. Jerry Reed. I met John Draper, and the list goes on. And so as a policy and process person, that just really made sense to me, approaching suicide prevention at a systemic level. And so I brought that information back and promoted it with our administration. And so they were completely supportive. We collaborated with our community behavioral health care centers, and we brought, y'all know Dr. Bart Andrews, we brought him on board. And to my knowledge, Missouri was the first state to have all of our community behavioral health care centers trained in the Zero Suicide model. I have a question up here.
And what year was that, Jackie?
That was in 2014, was the first Zero Suicide Academy.
That's interesting.
Let me see. Patty wants to know, do you think it's a problem for the future of children today having to wear masks and social distance and no social contact? I think that is not really within my area of expertise. I am not an expert in anything children or adolescent. My perspectives come from policy making and process development. Let's see.
So you had your first train, or you brought on Bart and some other folks, and you had your first training in 2014, which is a huge step. And I think I don't want to undersell this either. Like, to be able to actually do one of these academies is a big deal, and to have it sort of have it almost, it sounds like you were like, hey, this is a thing that we should do, and they're like, yeah, it is a thing we should do. That conversation is usually a lot harder, so it's awesome that they were so open to doing that and then following through.
Well, yes, and now it hasn't been an easy road.
Sure, it never is. Yeah.
So because well, we looked at our data, right? I mean, and this is something I would say to anyone in an academy. You don't know, we only have a limited number of resources. And so we need to use those resources, where they're needed most. And so you need to analyze your data. And so when we looked at, within our own population, those folks receiving services from the Department of Mental Health, where were the most suicides occurring? Well, they were occurring in a community setting. So, second to that, then we had our state-operated psychiatric hospitals. So we rolled it out kind of in stages. And so, we started with the community behavioral health care centers, then worked with our psychiatric hospitals. For the last 2 or 3 years, I took a step back from a lead position within the department, but I've been working with our Division of Developmental Disabilities on implementing some of the zero suicide concepts. So we're doing QPR training. We have nurses now doing suicide risk screening during their annual nursing assessments and things like that. So we've rolled it out, and are still working on it. Let's see. I need to let you know that in 2012, my son died, and he was 27 when he passed. He had over a 10-year history of substance use. And unfortunately, his drug of choice was methamphetamine, which which in Missouri was a huge, huge problem at the time. And he would become psychotic. And so we had times that he might have threatened suicide. He would also threaten others. We had an incident where he stabbed his father one night when he was under the influence. The night he died, he was under the influence, and he was an over-the-road truck driver, and he got out of the truck, and we don't know why. It was on the interstate. He was the passenger, his boss was driving, and we don't know. Was it an accident? Was it a suicide? And so at that moment, I began listening more closely, maybe to some of the suicide loss survivors. And some of the things that I heard were troubling to me, such as, I'm so sorry for your loss, especially to suicide. And I just think that there are many kinds of losses. I refer to them as special circumstance deaths. And you can find writing about it from Dr. Alan Wolfelt at the Center for Loss and Life Transition in Colorado. And I would, since I didn't really know how my son died, I didn't know where to go for support. And I would attend some of the loss survivor support groups and was apologetic. Is it okay if I sit in? I don't really know if my son died suicide, but anyway, long story short, I met Anne Marie Matulis in 2018. That was AAS in Washington, D.C. That was the annual conference was in Washington, D.C. that year. And so that was the first year I had actually attended the conference, or that AAS was even on my radar, probably. And so I heard Anne Marie and Rick Straight. They did a breakout session on impacted family and friends. Then we brought Anne Marie to Missouri to be a keynote for our annual conference, and did a breakout the following day as a training for facilitators for those who were interested in what she was doing. And so that really resonated with me, and that's when I felt like I had found a home. The following year, as you know, we promoted impacted family and friends at the conference in Denver, and we were encouraging everyone in attendance to sign up for a committee. And at that time, Impacted Family and Friends was a committee. We had so many people sign up that day that overnight we went from a committee to a division.
I remember that, and how big of a deal that was.
How big of a deal it was. Yeah.
Really, really quickly, can you tell us, and for folks who are watching who might not know what Impacted Family and Friends, what does that mean, and who's involved?
Okay, Impacted Family and Friends is for, it is for loss survivors, it's for attempt survivors, but it's also, because we want to include all lived experience, but Impacted Family and Friends are specifically those who've had loved ones who've gone through some type of a suicidal experience. So a non-lethal suicidal experience, or and then we know that we have these intersections of, say, substance use and suicide, domestic violence and suicide, problem gambling and suicide, and so on and so forth. The list is long, and there's categories that we've not even identified yet. So, so for me, having gone through over 10 years with a mentally ill, substance using child, adolescent, and not having any real resources. And of course, he's been gone 9 years, and so this has been almost 20 years ago, right? So things were different. They are different now. We do have more resources, but the only thing I had at that time was Codependence Anonymous. and and I would attend weekly over my lunch hour, just to connect with other families who were experiencing issues with substance use. But rarely did we cross any other, discussions like suicide or any kind of, self-injury, that kind of thing. And so, okay, so still on impacted family and friends.
Yep.
So I had volunteered. I became a facilitator, and we started groups in Joplin in November of 2018, and we were doing face to face when COVID hit, and so we have not met since COVID. Although we are in the process of transitioning to a virtual format. And what happened during the 2 years of COVID was that I lost some of the people that we had already trained as facilitators.
Mm.
And so we're planning to do in October or November an online training for facilitators for impacted family and friends. And so we won't spend any more time on impacted family and friends. I feel like we need to move on. So,
Well, no, that's fine. I think that gives a really nice sort of overview of what you've been able to accomplish, over your career, but also just within the last 3 to 4 years.
3 to 4 years, right? Mm-hmm.
And bringing, meeting Anne Marie, bringing folks together, having this facilitation process in place, and having another one coming up. I think like it just shows. I don't know. I've known you for, I think, probably 6 years, Jackie. I think we met in 2015 in Kansas City. But
In
um,
Kansas City, yeah.
yeah, and I think ever since I've known you to be a very driven person. Like if you know you want to get something done, you go and do it, and you make sure that it's done right, and you make sure that it has the evidence behind it, and all of that, and that it's very effective. And so I think I want to highlight that about you, but also about your work. Very recently, and goodness, getting you and Anne Marie paired up together is a recipe for getting a lot of stuff done. So, but I think this leads really well into the next question about what you want to get done. Now that you're a board member, you've been involved with AAS for a few years, but now that you're a board member, what sort of goals do you have?
Okay, well, the first thing, and since you know me, I'm kind of blunt, but clean up aisle 6. All right, clean up aisle 6. I just think that we need to return we need to get out of the chaos we've been experiencing the last few weeks, months, and return to a state of calm. And the way I think that we do that is through looking at we need to review. And I know we've been talking about this even before I joined the board, but they were talking about reviewing and revising bylaws as needed. Looking at developing, policies and procedures, implementing a code of ethics or a code of conduct for board members, just tightening things up for a number of reasons. But,
Mm-hmm.
we need to be transparent as an organization. Everyone involved needs to be accountable. I just think that we need to develop processes for better transparency and communication between our members, our general members, and the board members. I mean, it's a huge organization, 1,400 members. And I do know that we've recently had a few resignations, and that's unfortunate. It makes me sad. But for me, the organization, the mission is still intact. And so we need to look at what happened, why it happened, and how can we prevent it from happening in the future. So basically, a root cause analysis. And once we do that, we can analyze what happened. And as everyone knows, root cause analysis is completely blame free. We are not looking, it's not about this person, that person. It is about within this organization, within this system, what happened, why did it happen, and what can we do to prevent it from happening in the future. And that's why I stepped up and said I would volunteer, to do this, is because I feel like my skills and abilities are more related to governance than, let's say, me being a subject matter expert on suicide prevention.
That makes sense. And one of the things that you mentioned too is the transparency and direct line of communication from board members to members. And I'm assuming that you mean even beyond what we have set up in terms of the division structure, right? So that it's not just that one division's leader or chair in the board is communicating with just their members, but that intra communication between the division members and between their members, right? So like that, it's just a free flowing sort of line of communication.
Yes, that would be ideal. I don't know yet until I analyze, what the current procedures are.
Yeah.
But yes, that would be ideal. That would be ideal.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with transparency and communication between, an organization and its members. I mean, I think that's something that's key. And like Tracy said in the comments, that our mission is so important that we can't let this other stuff get in the way. And we've just got to keep driving forward. And we have a strong mission. We have a strong direction. And we have some great folks on the board, so that we've got the competent folks and the capacity to make it happen. So I think we're lucky to have you on board as one of those folks, Jackie.
Well, I want to say too that I've been a public servant for 26 years. And so I would like to take that to the board, that we are servants. When I got my master's in public administration, we learned about servant leadership. And so, right, I mean, I'm here to provide to the membership, and I am not here to promote myself or my career. I'm at the end of my career. I don't need to do it, right?
Yeah.
I do it because I want to, and it's a passion of mine, and it's important. And so I'm not a quitter. I want you to know I'm not a quitter. I have never backed away from a challenge. And I'm looking forward to helping the organization in any way I can through this transition time. I believe my term will last through 23. I do plan to retire from the department around this time next year. And so, this is a great place to be at my age and at my stage in the career, because, I can do what I want. I can do what I'm passionate about.
Yeah, well, and that's something that I think sort of mirrors the organization as a whole, in that we are nimble and we're able to be effective in ways that some other organizations or some other groups aren't, right? And so I think it's good that you have that. You sort of align with that, I think, in terms of organization and personal mission. And you've mentioned a few of these things, but I'm wondering if you have if you can give us a sense of, like, in the overarching field of suicide prevention, what is your biggest priority? What do you want to get accomplished?
Well, yeah, and I made some notes, so as I glance over, but I think the biggest priority is continuing to promote evidence-based, best and even promising practices. And I think we need to support scientific research in areas that are lacking. And so something I didn't mention before is I'm on the advisory panel for Johnny's Ambassadors, which is an organization dedicated to educating parents and teens about high potency THC products and the effect that they have on developing brains. And so, we need research around that. Some of the other people I've met, with similar situation to mine, only their children were using this high potency THC and became psychotic, and some then suicided. So, that's just one example. I think we need to push ahead with scientific research around the BIPOC community, Black, Indigenous, color, people of color. And the other thing, and this is the social worker in me, is that we meet people where they are, and that we learn better ways to reach in instead of thinking that people are going to reach out. So, for example, I'm a certified QPR suicide prevention gatekeeper instructor, where we're teaching people to ask, are you thinking about suicide? Versus telling people, well, here's the number, here's the text line. When you're in a dark place, please reach out. Well, I know personally from being in that dark place that it's not easy to reach out. So how do we reach in, and how do we meet people where they are? And how do we address the systemic inequities such as, poverty, housing, food, safety and security? We have issues with incarceration. I mean, it's so much bigger. If people were safe and secure, they might not feel, as suicidal. And so those are just some ideas. And then last is I want to promote gun safety. And we need to learn better ways to help minimize risk related to lethal means without people feeling like we're violating any of their rights. And so those would be the big things for me, I think.
Those are pretty major things. And I think they're critical to understand. Talking about environmental factors that we've seen from research recently from any number of folks that show that environmental factors sometimes play a way bigger part than things like mental health issues for some people, right? Especially we've seen the research around economic factors playing a massive role, which leads into things like you mentioned, housing, food accessibility, incarceration. There are so many different things that sort of either domino or surround each other ecologically that make sense for us to look at. And we know from research too that if we're talking about effective ways of preventing suicide, and we know like that can actually reduce numbers and reduce deaths, firearms safety and means safety is one of those very few things that we have evidence for. So I just want to echo that, like, yes, absolutely, all of those things.
Yeah.
Yes.
But in Missouri, we kind of had to tiptoe around gun safety for a few years.
In a lot of places,
I've been at this
yeah.
for a while, so we really had to be careful about conversations, the words we were using, so no, we're not talking about gun control. We're not talking about that at all. We're talking about safety, and just being able to reframe things in a language that people understand.
Yeah. And those are important conversations. We had a conversation last week on here with folks from every town, and just highlighting again how important that conversation is to have, regardless of where you sit on any political position. That suicide prevention remains the mission. And so, like, those are amazing things to look at in terms of priorities. Are there any things in the field or just with suicide prevention or mental health or anything in those regard that you want to see changed?
That I want to see change. Well, I just think we can still get better, and we can get better when it comes to diversity and inclusion, I was thinking I participated Friday. I tuned in for the all of the live, the Facebook Live for the Physician Suicide Awareness Day. And so I was just thinking, gosh, we need these collaborations with groups like this. And so I made a list. I'm like, who are the other stakeholders? How can we form these partnerships? And so, of course, physicians and healthcare and law enforcement, firemen, EMTs. I would like to see us do a little bit more with individuals with disabilities, not just autism, but all individuals with disabilities. It's all systemic. Again, looking at people who are maybe dually diagnosed, substance use, domestic violence, all those things that we can just get better. And that I think we need the research, and that AAS can help support that, So in terms of what things need to change, I really don't know. I just think we need to be better, and we need to do more of what we've started doing over the last few years. And that's making it a conversation that we're not limited to this is our little group, that everyone's invited to the table, because this is an issue that affects everyone.
Yep. Suicide prevention is everybody's business, right?
Yes.
And so I absolutely agree. I think, as a field, we've seen some major shifts in the last 5-10 years. Diversity, equity, inclusion was one of those areas where we've seen some movement, but really we need to see a lot more, and we need to see it faster than it's been happening. So absolutely, I think that's a great place to focus on in terms of change. And we have covered so much today, and I'm wondering if there's anything that you want to sort of leave people thinking about.
Yeah, I do. I thought about my personal mission statement, and a lot of this, yes, I have experience in a job that I was exposed to suicide in that job. However, I have some personal experience as well, lived experience, and I just want to honor like my son's memory through storytelling, education, advocacy, and prevention activities around suicide and other special circumstance deaths. And, I think we're all more alike than we are different. And that if we focus on our mission, we should be able to move forward without any problems.
I think that's a pretty solid way to end our talk on today. Mission forward, right?
Mission forward,
mission focused,
not a quitter. Clean up IC.
we got the talking points. That's it. No, I appreciate you jumping on this afternoon, Jackie, and just chatting with me for a few minutes. And I think it helps me. And we've talked, but it helps me to get to know you a little bit better too. And I hope that folks tuning in can get a better sense of who you are and what you're passionate about. I think that came through today. So I'm looking forward to having you on the board and working with you in whatever capacity that leads to. But I think if we do have members who would like to reach out to you, is there a way that they can reach out to you?
Oh, sure. I can I get in the chat? I can, can't I?
I can send it, or we can type it in later.
Okay. But, yeah. I mean, email is Jacque, JACQUE, Christmas, just like the holiday, at outlook.com.
Yep.
All right. That's my personal email. Okay. Shoot me a text, phone number 417-850-6892. I'm not real good at answering it, but I listen to my messages.
Sounds like me. I think
It
I
might
think
be
we're
one of my
all.
kids. I don't want to answer.
I think COVID's done that to us. We're just sort of like, I don't want to talk on the phone right now. All
Yeah.
right. Well, thanks so much, Jackie. I really appreciate
Thank
you jumping
you.
on.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
All
Looking
right.
forward to the future.
Absolutely.
All
All right.
right.
Thanks everybody for tuning in, and I hope you have a wonderful afternoon.